Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Tommy, if you want to throw up our slides, we can go ahead and get started. All right. So welcome, everybody. We're very excited to have you all joining us for this, our fourth CEP work group session. Today's topic is alternative income forms, stakeholder buy-in, and communication. So let's go to the next slide, please. We're going to have some updates today, talking about waivers, some state and federal updates. We're very excited to have our guest speaker, Daryl Hickey, Nutrition Services Director from Pomona, joining us to talk to you about alternative income forms today. We're going to follow it with some question and answer time. You guys will get plenty of time to have some open discussion and get all your questions answered by Daryl before we close out today. So first note, there is total confidentiality today in our Q&A session. We will be recording the presentation portion of this session, but only for the presentation portion only. At the conclusion of Daryl's presentation, we will stop recording for the Q&A segment. Please do, in the meantime, as you have questions that come to you, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We also recommend to go ahead and rename yourself if you haven't already. In the Zoom function, what you would do is right click on the three dots in the upper right hand corner of your profile picture, scroll to the bottom to the rename option, and you can enter your new screen name and press OK. So for example, you can put Daryl Hickey, Pomona USD. So that way we know who you are and where you're from. Also, please do keep muted, and Tommy can also help mute your line. Next slide, please. This is the No Kid Hungry workshop team. You guys, I think, are all familiar with us. We've got Daisy Mungia Pignon, Janelle Williams-Pagan, myself, I'm Robin Hernandez, Tommy Lee, and Paige Picorni from our Center for Best Practices joining us today. Next slide. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Paige. She is joining us live from the East Coast from our Center for Best Practices, and she's going to give you some very important updates from the USDA side.
Thanks, Robin. You make the East Coast sound so exciting, and live from the East Coast. Awesome. So you might know some of this information, some of it might be new. And also, I don't want to take up too much time out of the CEP conversation. So always feel free to reach out to me or any of the California team for clarity on any of what I share. But as you may know, Congress did not extend USDA's nationwide waiver authority. However, that does not mean states cannot apply for waivers. So state agencies can apply for certain waivers. The common, if you will, summer waivers that have been commonly available pre-pandemic are first week site visits, offer versus serve for all sponsors versus just SFAs, meal service time restrictions, and area eligibility for closed enroll sites. So those are the common waivers. However, new this summer because the parent pickup non-congregate waivers are expiring come June 30. Those states can request those. Area eligibility is the exception. There are some additional flexibilities, and on the slide you'll see those, and I can get into them offline with you, but know that there are some flexibilities around area eligibility, recognizing that school meal data for your reduced meal applications and submissions were not ideal this past 2 years. USDA is working on guidance and additional flexibilities for school year 22-23, but nothing has been put out yet. That being said, because of USDA cannot issue nationwide waivers, and none of the waivers issues can impact overall federal spending, so they have to be cost neutral. We suggest a plan to return to traditional school breakfast program and national school lunch program, which is why this conversation around CEP is so important. And then last but not least, state agencies can also request CEP deadline extensions. And I believe there's going to be a California specific update on these types later. Next slide. And just a few new resources and upcoming events from No Kid Hungry. So yesterday we had a webinar with talking about kind of the back to basics, COVID flexibilities versus traditional SFSP operation and SSO operations. And then we had USDA on the line. So I don't think the recording's up yet, but it will be at that link eventually. And the slide deck will also be available. Additionally, we have a really great side-by-side comparison chart of that usual versus flexible SFSP and SSO operations. And then understanding that programs this summer might be changing, likely be changing. We have a resource that's a Google Doc, and you can just copy and paste draft language on how to communicate program changes to parents and families. So that includes program changes in terms of congregate feeding instead of non-congregate, and also ending services at a certain site because of if they're not area eligible anymore. And then I do also want to plug that both today and tomorrow are the Rural Child Hunger Summit, and you can still, it's free to attend. It's all virtual. It's really great. And then we have an upcoming webinar in our summer webinar series all about promoting your summer program, and that will be May 17th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And once that registration link is live, I'm sure it will be shared out in No Kid Hungry California's newsletter.
All right, thank you so much, Paige, for that information. Just a side note, I watched that Summer Meals 101 webinar myself, and I do highly recommend it for anybody on the call who is doing summer meals this year. You had some really great side-by-side comparisons of what operations look like during COVID versus what they would need to look like this summer. So I highly recommend that for directors or any of your staff that are implementing summer meal programs to watch that webinar. Keeping in the theme with summer, some state updates that are specific to California. For those of you who may have missed the CDE town hall yesterday, these were some of the announcements that were made. There are a couple of summer waivers that were approved. So for those of you operating SFSP, your on-site pre-approval visits, that has been waived. You may now do that virtually. And then your first week site visit has been waived. However, it must be done within the first 4 weeks as opposed to just the first week. Waivers in place for SSO and SFSP include waiving the need to have meal applications, establish your eligibility for children at closed enrolled sites. So instead of qualifying the children specifically at a closed site, you may now use your school data or census data to get a closed site approved, much like you would already for an open enrolled site. Also, the required times between meals and duration of mealtime, that has been waived, but you still must establish what your meal times are in your CNIPS application. So please make sure that you have that updated. Other waivers such as non-congregate and parent meal pickup, those are not approved for summer and would only be approved in cases where you're directly limited by COVID-19 restrictions. So basically it's going to be business as usual this summer in California, with the exception of those waivers I just mentioned. Next slide, please. And then also mentioned at the town hall, we do have one CEP waiver that that is going to be in place. SFAs may now use data from any time between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2022 to establish your ISP. So your requirement of 40% for a school or grouping of schools still remains, but you may use any date in the school year to establish your ISP. The previous requirement said you had to use the data as of April, but now it's anytime July through June. Your deadline to apply of June 30th is still the same. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to remind you that our CEP expansion grants are still available. We are offering to school districts operating CEP next year. The link to apply for these CEP grants is available in the emails that have been sent out to all of our registrants. So you should have received like the link to this grant in the email reminding you of our session today. It's also in our follow-up emails. Just make sure you scroll down and read through those. It's got all of the information there. You can apply for a CEP grant and use the funds for things like administrative costs, increasing participation. So for example, if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to use that clicker count, and maybe you want to implement a grab and go program next year because you're CEP and now you can use clickers and you don't have to use that POS system anymore. That can be something you can apply for funding for. Or marketing, something that's not allowable with your regular cafeteria funds. Maybe you want to use that to market your universal meals program. We're also open to your great ideas as well. Whatever you feel like CEP is going to bring your way that you need funding for, you can possibly apply for a grant. So please be sure to check that out. The application period closes May 14th and grant funds are awarded in June. Next slide, please. And now we are very excited to pass it over to our guest speaker. We have Daryl Hickey joining us from Pomona Unified School District. He's the Director of Food and Nutrition Services and longtime CEP pro, and he's got some really, really great tips for how to handle alternative income forms. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Daryl. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity. I don't know about pro, it's kind of a stretch. I think it's kind of like do the opposite of what I had to go through. You know, we go back to 4 years when this all started, and the really the only thing that CDE had at that time was it was like a 40-page PDF type of thing that you'd print up, and it was okay, great, let's go through this. And you know, if I can preface this is kind of like a, you know, if you've ever put together like an IKEA desk or something, you know, you think you're almost done, you get to the end, and then you realize one of the sides is on backwards, and you got to take the whole thing apart to put it back, you know, on the right way. And then when you're done with the project, you realize you got a bunch of pieces left over, and you're like, did I do it wrong? Are these extra? What's happening? So I think just, you know, when I hear the term best practice, sometimes I think, oh, this person exactly knows what's going on. And that's not me. I think from this, it's just to explain where we started, how we went through in our process. And this isn't necessarily the answer for everybody, but at least the main bullet points and the things that I kind of go over. And at the end, my contact information will be in there. And when I've had the opportunity to speak with people outside of this, a lot of times they're more specific questions, or there's kind of some back and forth dialogue. So I welcome that as well. So my goal is just to kind of give you an overview of where we're at, you know, the growing pains, so to speak, and everything that went on. So just to kind of give you an overview of us, Pomona Unified is in Los Angeles County. We're one of the most eastern cities in LA County. We have about 21,000 students. We have 39 school sites. And like a lot of us, we're experiencing declining enrollment. So going back, this is our 4th year. So going back before CEP, we were about 87% free and reduced. And our district is very diverse in the sense that I have a high income area and especially needy area. So we kind of have both extremes with that. So what we noticed is when we first started doing CEP, like a lot of you, you're probably looking at like, well, one school, you know, qualifies and one doesn't, and should I combine them? What our kind of goal was, we didn't want to have like them versus us, or how can they have it and that school doesn't? And then what do you do when you have a family who has multiple students and some are at one school that gets the meals and the other one's not? So we really wanted to make sure that this was all encompassing for everybody. One thing that was really interesting is, and this is based on assumptions of what we've seen, is, you know, when we first started, the percentages were so close, and we're trying to get things. And then the year before we started it, we're like, we're just not there yet. And all of a sudden the next year we were, and we're like, well, what's going on? And as we continued and as enrollment declined, our percentages went up. And so what we kind of inferred was, for families that are in any kind of support or getting any kind of benefits, they're a lot of times rooted in your community because they have housing, they may have doctors, any other kind of support services already established in the community. So as folks may be leaving California, the area, with everything that had gone on during COVID, the remaining population allowed us to meet those percentages. And we continue to see that as we go. So like I said, we've been doing this for 4 years now, and we reapply every year. So the first year, so don't be afraid. Once you do this, this isn't like you just do it and then you never look at it again. And so when you apply, even if you're not maxed out. So as an example, my first year we did it. So instead of the 62.5, I think we're at like 61 point something. It got us around 97% free and the rest were paid. But we thought, you know what, it's our first year, let's try it again. And then the next year we got to 100%. And then what we continue to do is, and I recommend that. So even if you do it 1 year, keep applying, because what you'll find is as you get higher in the percentages, the smallest increase can mean so much more revenue for your program. So what we continue to do is reapply every year and kind of start the clock over. And so we're doing it again this year where we're reapplying and we're already maxed out at the 100%, but we're going to continue to do this. What that will do is it'll help keep kind of your pulse on what's going on in your district. As an example, the first year we did it, we are just under the maximum. Then we found out that possibly Amazon was going to be moving a distribution center into Pomona. And I was like, oh my goodness, if Amazon moves in, I have a feeling just everything's going to change in this area. I need to know what's going on, because if I need to switch back for some reason, I need to know that ahead of time. And so that didn't happen, but we continued to do this because we want to make sure, because if you max out 1 year, so let's say for this discussion, you max out and then you're like, okay, I'm going to keep reapplying. And all of a sudden your percentage starts to go down. You're like, well, wait a minute. I'm already 100%. I still have 4 more years. If I reapply, my percentage will go down. I'm not going to reapply because I still have my 4 years. Why don't I just keep doing my numbers every year to see what's going on? Maybe something socioeconomically is changing in your area, but you want to kind of be aware of that, because just again, for this scenario, let's say year 3, all of a sudden you're way down. You're like, oh my goodness, I've only got 1 more year. I'm going to have to go back to applications, or what else I'm going to have to do. You're going to want to know about that ahead of time so that there's no surprises. So one thing that was really important is, and I think you can, I don't know if you can switch to the next slide. It was really important that we met with our cabinet level first. And that was like so vital, because one of the ongoing problems and kind of pushbacks once you start this program, you really start to see how much your district relies upon you. And originally for the free and reduced meal applications and percentages and things like that. And I let them know, when I presented this, they're like, this is a great opportunity. All of our kids get to eat at no cost. And I said, that's great. So I met with my cabinet and I said, is everybody on board with this? They said, yes, whatever we need. I said, okay, well, get ready, because you're going to lose my information in the sense of free and reduced percentages. So it really went from yeah to, oh, wait, what? And so we had that discussion. And so having those discussions back and forth with cabinet level people to let them know, hey, if you lose my free and reduced percentages, what does that do to your programs? So you need to make sure at that point that they understand from that point on, they can't call you anymore like it used to be and say, hey, can I get all my 12th graders? They're all going to be taking the SAT and I need to know free and reduced percentages so they get a discount. I don't have that anymore. So it's like, what is the district going to do to implement to capture that information when there's no meal applications and things like that? Our district switched to online registration. So when we went to online registration, they ended up including in that registration piece a segment for alternate income form information. And basically it's just a drop down. And I think I might have that if you keep going on the slides. So we talked about that online registration. One of my slides should pop up, I'm hoping, with a little picture. Okay, right there. Okay, so this is a rough picture of what they deal with. So as a parent or guardian, when you're going through, and if you think about most of online registration is the same thing as was a meal application: name, address, family members, schools, students' names, those kind of things. So this is a sample of what we have in ours, where it's a basic dropdown and goes back to how many people are in the household. And what we found is when we first started looking at alternate income forms, it's kind of like if you ever do an online survey and they say, how old are you? Are you between the ages of 25 and 60? And you're like, oh yeah, I'll put that in there. But if they ask you exactly how old you are, you're like, I don't want to tell them that. And the same thing with the income. If someone says, how much do you make? And you're like, well, I don't want to share that information. But if they say, do you make between, 20,000 and 150,000 a year, you're like, yeah, I'm in between there. So what our district decided to do on this one is, you can see the drop down behind the scenes, it's the free, reduced, and paid for dollar amounts. So what we found is most families are willing to say yes. How many people are in the family? They'll say 3. So when they click on the arrow, it'll just do the drop down. And then what is your income range? And so that income range correlates with the free and reduced percentages. And so that's what the district is actually using to capture their needed information for their funding. So that was, again, going back with the cabinet levels to explain to them, once we start this program, 1, we can't go back in the sense that we're going to keep moving forward, but 2, that they need to capture their own information. This piece right here is vital for your CBOs to have that discussion with them, because what'll happen was they'll move forward and say, yeah, we'll do CEP, sounds great, you start everything, and then they come to you for your alternate income forms. And really, we have no driving force to do anything. Do we get families to fill it out? You know, do we get principals to push it? What do we need to do? So putting this in place got rid of that. There is some wiggle room, and there needs to be confirmation with your IT people. At that time, whatever funding for the funding pieces that they need for Title I and all that stuff, they were able to lock in the year before to start this. So the first year we did this for online enrollment, they captured like 90 to 95% of the population. And since then, it's in the high, like 99% almost is able to do it. So because there was a lag the first year, they're actually able to like freeze their percentages 1 year to put this into place. And then they're able to capture the information. So with this in place, it completely separates you as a food service department and the district when it comes to funding. So now, like years afterwards, like the next year and this and that, I'd still get that phone call of, can I get my 8th graders are doing something and I need to know the free and reduced percentages. I don't have that any longer. You need to contact IT. My 12th graders are going to be taking the AP test. That's huge for discounts. And I now say, I no longer capture that information. You need to reach out to the school district. Also finding out what this is, the school districts for CalPads and things like that tracks a whole bunch of other information. They'll track other things that help support their income and or their percentages, but stuff that we don't necessarily track. So let's see. Okay, so I'm off the screen. Okay. So kind of going back, so when we started this, we started to see some of our biggest increases for us, it was the secondary level. So if you think about, and I'm going to speak generally, and I know it's like a little bit different for everybody, but more than likely, all of your elementary kids come through the line because it's kind of what you do. You just, bell rings, teacher walks them out to the line. The junior highs, it's not so much the bell rings and I'm too cool for that, so I'm going to go play basketball, or I'm going to do this, or hang out with my friends. And then in the high school, there's so much other stuff that's going on during the lunchtime. So that's going to be your opportunity to capture your most. And so what I did was I took all of my school enrollments and then my participation, and I ranked where is my biggest opportunity to capture most of the students. Traditionally, you're going to see 2 years of increased participation, and then it levels out. I was told that in the beginning. I was like, okay, I'm just being told this, and then it ended up kind of working out because the whole first year, it's all new, it's exciting, everybody rushes. Second year, everybody's already kind of doing it, and then it kind of mellows out. So for me, I saw about a 3% increase at my elementary sites, and it was only 3% because most of my elementary kids ate anyways. Junior highs, I saw about an 8%, and then the high schools, I saw a 10%. And the biggest jump that I saw was at the high school, where there's a big difference between enrollment and the kids actually eating. One thing that was really important too was in our district, free meals had such a negative connotation, and we see that traditionally. So we changed it from the kids don't get free meals, it's a no cost meal program. So we used to tell them the same way that you don't pay for your books, you don't pay for the desk. This is a meal program that's for everybody. We also looked at it as how do we kind of market this, because we started saying stuff and we've got this no cost meal program, and people were like, great, like what does that mean? So then we thought we need to really look at how this is going to affect each kind of segment in our population. As an example, we reached out to our high paid elementary schools where the majority of the kids did not eat, they brought their own meals. So what we kind of, at that site, I actually sat down and met with some of the PTA families, and they said, well, we don't eat your meal, we send our meals or whatever the situation is. And I said, well, how many times have you woken up and you realized you didn't have any bread, or you ran out of milk, or you ran out of sandwich meat or something like that? Why don't you send them to my program and I'll feed them? And we also had some families that had some religious or cultural preferences, things that we don't accommodate. But I say, look, why don't you send your student with an entree, and they can take my fruit, my vegetable, my milk, and oh, by the way, it's Tuesday, it's treat day, we've got a special treat they can go through. And again, it's no cost. And we kept pushing it to no cost meal program to really, emphasize that. So we also looked at targeting like sports. That was like a big thing. And I took that from my own personal experience with my son who played football, because usually during the beginning of school year, that's when football programs are going on. And during lunchtime, all of those players usually have to like go to the coach's room when they watch film or they talk and stuff like that. So I would lose like hundreds of kids district wide. So what I did was I started reaching out to the sports teams and letting them know, hey, coaches, I know you spend a lot of time doing meetings and this and that. So why don't you send all of your athletes through my line? I'll hook them up with, again, meals at no cost, because it's a no cost meal program. And then they were able to eat. So we did that. And we also emphasized too is, a lot of the times they're away games or they're away competitions. So why don't they, make sure that they have a full stomach? So at least at lunchtime. So it helps them with that. Another thing that was really important was meeting with PTA and the PTO groups. It's like the best way to spread word is through the PTA families. And so it was really important. So I would literally start meeting with all of these families and letting them know all the benefits of it, and to really ask them, can I get their help? Because they're the ones that are going to be hanging out in front of the school waiting to pick up their kids. They're the ones that are going to be on Facebook talking about, hey, I heard that they're going to be providing meals next year. And really to kind of promote it that way. The other thing is we met with our teachers and to make sure that whenever the principals had like a teacher meeting, that we could meet with them, because again, they're the ones that are going to be having parent-teacher conferences, are going to be talking with the students. They may identify the students that really need this program and to really promote it with them. Another thing is I kind of took peer pressure and used it to my advantage, where I met with the ASB classes. Traditionally, that's going to be your leadership and the students that are the leaders in the school. So I really reached out to them, and one, promoted our program to them to share. A lot of times they don't come through the line. They're busy before school with ASB stuff, busy after school, at lunch. So I really use it as an opportunity to kind of promote our program and really ask for the help in their leadership, explaining those kind of things. Again, a lot of them didn't know about it. A lot of them didn't know that we were doing some special things, like we might offer like, meatless Mondays and different choices of things, and, sharing all the fruits and vegetables and all the fun things that we did. So kind of using that to our advantage. Social media, a lot of times you just hear people say, oh, social media, just put it on social media and that'll work. And it's interesting because I got more information spread by word of mouth than with social media. And also too, depends on what social media that people are participating in. Throwing it on your district's homepage gets lost with so much stuff. And so what we ended up doing is when I would do this, I wouldn't just do a blast email to principals. I'd reach out to each individual principal, a lot that I knew or some that may have been new to the district, so that I could explain things and let them know what's going on. Because what they would do is they would put it on their homepages, because a family is more likely to go on a school's homepage. And then also I found out through this that a lot of the local schools were sending out like a monthly newsletter. And so I'm like, perfect, it's going to go directly to the families of the school. So a parent's more likely to open up the monthly newsletter from their child's school than they are to go to the district's homepage. And so that was a really big piece as well. And the one thing that's real important is this doesn't happen overnight. It takes it takes some time to kind of get the word out there. And you'd think something as big as, hey, no cost meal program, it would spread like wildfire. But for some reason it doesn't, because one, not everybody participates in your program, and hopefully that'll change as this comes out. And then also two, I had people didn't believe me. I actually had a father come to our office and said, I heard that you're feeding kids for free. What's going on? And I said, yeah, we're doing a special no cost meal program. He says, are you sure? And I said, yes, sure. There's no problem. He goes, how do I trust you? I said, sir, I'm the director. Here's my card. If you get charged, you call me personally. So he left. We also had another, I'll never forget it. You have those times in your food service career that you never forget these things, where a mom came in and she was speaking Spanish, and I speak a little Spanish. I was kind of picking up because she was talking to one of my other employees, and she was basically explaining they were reduced, but she had 4 children and how difficult it was. And when she found out that there was a no cost meal program, the mom started crying. I mean, it was like, it's poignant times where it's like these, we're going through all this stuff and we sit in meetings and we do all this stuff, but then it's sometimes you forget that like there's somebody on the other end of all of this and stuff. And so you go from a father not believing you and you having to prove it to a mother who's crying because now all of her kids can get food and not have to pay for anything. So, and again, it's exhausting all of your avenues. And these are just the ones that I came across. And so there could be other things, whether there's community outreach or other groups or things like that. Again, these are just some of the things that that I did. And then I have the be prepared. There's some unplanned benefits, and it was kind of interesting. Like you do all this stuff, and you're like, great, I've done my promotion. I've kind of sold everything. There was no more money to handle. So now we realized afterwards, our managers were spending 20 to 30 minutes a day, like doing deposits and counting money and stuff like that. All that went away. So they actually had more time. You figure 30 minutes a day, what's that, 2.5 hours a week now is freed up for them to do stuff. We also saved banking time. We had to pay for a courier to come. So we didn't have to do that anymore. We also did things like to streamline it even more. I would rather have a student go through my line and get a reimbursable meal than to pay for an a la carte. So we actually stopped selling a la carte items like Gatorades and things like that and went straight to reimbursable meals. Again, it got rid of the stigma of, oh, you're a cool kid, you get to go in there and pay for a la carte, and I'm a free kid and I have to go inside to get the tray. It got rid of all of that. So it just turned into, look, we feed all reimbursable meals. And the staff actually appreciated that because in the back of the house, there was so much extra inventory, bottles of Gatorade everywhere. There was so much stuff that was going in there. So we actually gave that back to the school sites and to the ASP and said, look, we're gonna give this back to you. And it was amazing because we actually, by doing less, you're able to accomplish more because you can really focus in on what's going on. There's going to be some other things like once you start, if you figure it won't start first day, because I was literally like first day of school at the high schools. I'm like, okay, here we go. I had one school, we had a difference of about 600 kids that didn't eat every day. And I'm like, you guys get ready. This is going to be great. Like hundreds of kids are going to show up and you got like 30 kids. And you're like, oh, wait, did we do something wrong? Did they not know? But it's like it started off slow and it went to 30 kids and then 35 and then 40. And I'll be honest, it kind of helped because if we got inundated with like 500 extra kids, it would have just kind of blown us away. We did things like we warned the principals, like, I think more kids will be coming through. The lines may be a little bit longer as we do this, so just be patient with us. But it slowly increased. But you're going to find things like if all of a sudden your site added 200, 300, 400 more meals, what about refrigeration? What about freezer space? What about racks? What about pans? Those kind of things. I know a lot of us order food 4, 6, 8 weeks out. What are you doing for food? Because all of a sudden your counts go up and you haven't started ordering food. So there was some kind of balance going on there. And then the other thing was we didn't even think about this was the custodians came to us and said, I need more trash cans. I need more trash bag, liners. We need more dumpsters because if all of a sudden you start feeding more kids, which means you're going to need more trash to go along with it. So definitely having that support structure in there. And then also getting ready if you need to move staffing around and making sure all your points of sale are open, those kind of things. And then ultimately, like looking at your point of sale, if you're having the students, originally we were having the students do their PIN number and just that additional hesitation doing a number. Now all of our secondary sites, they all use the barcode that they're issued during the summer where they have on the phone or in their pocket. So that kind of streamlines it. So, and again, this is all just kind of trial and error. Like I said in the beginning, it was just calling around and asking questions and trying to figure it out as you go. And you kind of learn as you go. And it's just amazing some of the things that popped up. my goal was, I thought, you know what, even if CEP didn't bring me in more money, what are going to be the savings? And you're going to have more savings, like saving time from counting money and money pickup. And I'll be honest, I stopped selling Gatorade and I made more money because we were losing more Gatorades, and we'd let staff drink one, or those kind of things. And so we stopped doing, it's kind of weird, we stopped doing things and things got better, and we got more productive and we got more profitable, and the schools ended up winning as well, because then they got the ASB sales and those kind of things. So again, like I started in the beginning, I'm not an expert in this. I think sometimes the first or second person through the wall gets hit, beat up the most. And so it's like, reach out to that person, which hopefully I can be and contact if you guys have any questions or if there's anything specific. And ultimately, once you get on CEP, you're going to love it. It's awesome, because there's so many times now I sit in a meeting and I'm like, I don't have to worry about alternate income forms. There's so many other issues that go on that we don't have to really worry about. So it does make it kind of nice. So here's my my email and phone number if you have any questions or anything specific or any ideas. And again, it's just, we're all in this together. I'm here to share information where I can. And if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Daryl. We're now going to be moving into the Q&A portion of our session. So just a reminder, we will not be recording this portion of the session. We encourage you